I'm joined today by Dr. Gavin Ortlund. And Gavin, we're talking about Christian apologetics and Christian theology. A question that people raise, I've seen it raised by children, by atheists, leaders of atheist society. I've even heard some of the great philosophers like Bertrand Russell raise it. And it has to do with the question, if everything needs a cause, then why doesn't God himself need a cause? How do you tackle that question?
Yeah. Well, I've been doing my own study in apologetics over the last 8 months or so. And I was telling you earlier, I've been looking at Richard Dawkins' book, The God Delusion.
Yeah.
And I was really excited to get into it, and especially in chapter 3, he tackles the arguments for God's existence. The first one he covers is kind of a blend of the first 3 of Thomas Aquinas' 5 ways,
Right.
which are basically the cosmological argument, the argument for God as the first cause. And he gives this response. And I remember and it's a very brief response, it's just about a page long, but what he basically says is, why should God be an exception to this need for an infinite regress and a starting point? And in other words, if everything needs a cause, what caused God? And that, it struck me because Christians have had a lot to say about that, and other theists have as well, and I wasn't aware that he was engaging with some of those answers. So I would say one thing that has helped me think about this is most versions of the cosmological argument don't actually say everything needs a cause.
Right.
The version of the argument that I'm most familiar with, that William Lane Craig has done so much to popularize,
The Kalam.
the Kalam cosmological argument, and that says everything that begins to exist needs a cause.
So rather than everything, anything that begins needs a cause.
Exactly, which is a different claim to engage with.
Sure.
The other thing that's really helped me think about this is when we talk about God, if we're thinking kind of in the Western tradition, the Abrahamic tradition, what we mean by that word is something uncaused.
Yeah.
So in a way, asking what caused God is kind of like asking, who is the bachelor's wife?
Okay.
Or something like
a category mistake, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I think so because, someone can deny that an uncaused being exists. That's an intelligible position. But if you say what caused the uncaused being,
Yeah.
it's kind of like asking how big is infinity or something like that. And that's one of the reasons why I find God, this idea of a being, the way I've often thought of it is God is not just one thing within reality, but reality itself subsists within God. God is the ground of reality. And this argument, I think, is one of the reasons where you feel, at least I personally have felt this deeply from this argument of the need for God and the uniqueness of God. You really need something to start the whole show.
It seems as well, Gavin, that if you have this infinite regress, well, what caused the earth or the universe? God did. What caused God? God squared, God cubed. I mean, if you keep this infinite regression, nothing ever begins. It seems like philosophers are more and more open to the idea of a necessary being, an eternal being, or an uncaused being. That seems very much in line with the Abrahamic tradition.
Right, yeah. I think so, and I suspect that perhaps this argument is one of the things that has caused, within academic philosophy, there's a lot more theists today than there were 50 years ago. And I don't know the exact reason for that, but I wonder if this argument may be one of the factors because it's such a powerful intuition that the world wouldn't just pop into existence from nothing for no reason. I mean, every time I think about it, it kind of hits me afresh.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I think sometimes people don't realize is when people think of the Big Bang, what most scientists believe that is it's not just a state of minimal energy or a state of darkness or something like that, but they mean nothing. And
no matter, energy, space, time, potential.
Exactly. And it's impossible to even imagine that because when I try to think of nothing, I just think of blackness.
Yeah.
But of course, blackness is something.
Yeah.
And to think that the universe would pop into existence from nothing and that there's no need for an explanation for that or something behind that, so to speak, that is the cause of that is really counterintuitive.
Now, Leibniz had what I think is the ultimate metaphysical question: why is there something rather than nothing? The Bible talks about, St. Augustine, for example, argued that Scripture teaches a creation ex nihilo. There's only the triune God, and God calls all things into existence from nothing. Do you see that paralleling the Big Bang?
That's how I think of it. Yes, I think of the Big Bang as kind of a scientific term that's referring to the start of God's making the world. And yeah, the idea of the Trinity as the creator of the world, I think resonates with a lot of younger postmodern types who, because what you end up with there is a vision of reality where there's basically two kinds of things.
Yeah.
There's God and then there's everything else. And that's kind of the ultimate framework for reality. And I find that as a kind of postmodern person in my own instincts, a millennial,
Yeah.
I find that just an enthralling worldview to think that there's this infinite person that's at
Yeah.
the start of everything. To me, that is such a beautiful and intriguing worldview. To consider that feels like the children in Narnia going through the wardrobe.
Yeah.
You never know what you're going to find if there's an infinite God out there. But if you're a naturalist, I find that a much more constricting, confining way of looking at the world.